investment tax credit?
That's a tough question.
So yeah, here's how we've protected ourselves, is that we have the ability to step in and resolve projects. So we have the rights to take over the unfinished project, to cure that project, to make us whole in that process. So we won't be in a situation where if they don't complete the project, they walk away, we have nothing. We can actually step in and cure that project. We wanted to give them enough runway so that they can get this completed on time. And so as we've been working with banking entities, we've been working with our PFM, who is our financial consultant, that we believe that they have enough time to finance this and get this done, and the runway is enough to where the financiers who control the money are going to feel comfortable financing the projects. So that's how we've controlled it. We've given them runway, but then we have the step-in rights to cure should they fail to perform.
As of when?
Right after COD. They have time to cure after COD, and then we can step in after that. So commercial operation is kind of a demarcation in time where we can start stepping in and take action.
Well, if we see that they're slow X months in advance, what can we do?
Yeah, so we have milestones in the agreement that they have liquidated damages, and if they run out of liquidated damage, we can step in if we choose to in their shoes before that time. On to the third project that bringing forward in June is the Barron Ridge Solar Project, which is 60 megawatts of solar. And this is a little bit different because it's not connecting right into the Barron Ridge, the Beacon substation. It's connecting into the Barron Ridge substation. So it's on the west side of the Highway 14 up there. This is going to be fixed tilt in this case for the 60 megawatts. Again, we do have ownership in this project going forward and can step in a lot of different periods. This project we expect to be done by the end of 2015, and the reason for this is because it's connecting it right into the Barron Ridge substation rather than the Beacon substation. A little over $240 million for 20 years, and this is in the upper 60s for this particular project, with again a very small rate impact for our ratepayers. We added this slide in just to give you what our road is to get to 33% by the end of 2020, and the main portion is to show here right where we are in 2014 that really going forward, we have a lot of wind already in our portfolio, but going forward, solar, and looking forward at geothermal, and that's what we were looking forward, both with the feed-in tariff, the SIP program, and then, of course, all the large-scale programs that we're bringing forward. And then, really, just any questions here going forward.
Let me just double back, stay on the investment tax credit for a moment. I assume that this expiration will impact the various components of the feed-in tariff program as well, so that if people in the feed-in tariff program haven't completed their project by this time period, they lose the tax credit. It applies to any solar project, doesn't it?
That is correct.
And do we have a concern about the various feed-in tariff projects being completed in time?
The design of the set price 100 megawatt feed-in tariff was designed such that those projects would be well before 2016. As we've talked about, in 2015 would be the last tranche, and they have 18 months to get those built, so they have time. The Fit 50, which is what we'll be bringing to you as part of the Beacon bundled projects, they also had time periods, 3 time periods to hit those targets. So we believe that they have that time to get done before 2016 to achieve the tax credit. Now, a expanded feed-in tariff program is different, because that might kick in and overlap between the time of tax benefits and non-tax benefits.
And without the tax benefits, are these projects profitable to the developers?
Well, it depends. Yes, they'll probably still be profitable because without the tax benefits, they will reprice. And we've heard anywhere between 20 to 30% minimum price increases for solar if everything else stays the same. And so we would expect that proposals that start to come in after 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019 will start to reflect those higher prices.
And then how competitive will those prices be by comparison to other forms of power?
They will be much less competitive. We think that if they see a 20 to 30% price increase for solar, geothermal will be much more cost effective moving forward.
How would it compare to gas?
To natural gas?
Natural gas.
Well, today, with about a $60 price, we're finding that we're on par with natural gas, which is why you're not seeing the rate increase.
But it's priced in the context of the tax credit.
That's right. And you take that away, and then you would expect that you would have a 20 to 30% bump up above avoided cost of natural gas.
If I could,
Yeah.
because we should probably put in context when we say tax benefits. There are several tax benefits associated with renewable projects and solar in particular. In the state of California, there's the exemption related to property tax value increase associated with solar installations. So these big projects can be built on the land and it doesn't increase the property tax assessment. So you're not paying where you would in a gas plant or any other type of plant. There are some potential dates upcoming where that could be revisited by the state and that could expire, or they could renew that. There are accelerated depreciation tax benefits on solar as well that are there that potentially could be expiring soon. And then there's just the upfront related to the capital expenditure on the solar projects where you could get a 30% offset right off the top of your capital expenditure. So there's several different layers, and one might proceed, another might not. So there is a lot of unknown and uncertainty related to how this will progress.
Is the federal investment tax credit related only to capital investment?
I believe so.
I'm confused about some aspect of it. Some people came to see me about solar issues, and they made the argument that some of the solar companies we're dealing with currently in our FIT program, once the investment tax credit expires, these companies are not going to be able to continue to operate profitably. But I don't understand why that would be the case if it's only in the context of capital investment. Does it impact ongoing operations after the capital investment?
The investment tax credit does not.
Yeah.
If they made use of the production tax credit, then that could, but that is not nearly as beneficial as the investment tax credit. So every solar developer I've talked to wants to get that because that's the premium product for them.
So they want to get the capital investment done.
That's right.
In time to obtain the credit, but they're not worried about ongoing operations once the capital is invested before 2016 is
Because
over.
they've already extracted the benefits.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of the entities we're dealing with don't have the tax appetite themselves, so they have to bring in a tax equity partner to help monetize some of those tax benefits, and so you'll see some of these unique partnerships that occur.
Right. Other questions or comments on this very helpful presentation?
I simply just want to applaud your efforts. I feel that you've done a stellar job in creating a diverse and creative strategy to achieving our goals.
Thank you.
I second that. Commissioner Parad?
I just have a question. Does any of what we're talking about impact the proposed projects in the North San Fernando Valley?
The projects that we're talking about are all large-scale, utility-scale projects. So what we bring before you will not impact the North San Fernando Valley, and that's the feed-in tariff program
Yes.
that's existing.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I probably need to add a clarification there, though. Within this, we have a bundled 50 fit, and those will be 50 megawatts of projects within the city. So to some extent, we don't know yet where those developers are proposing to build those projects within the city. So it will be under the same issue that we're discussing now and that we're trying to work with the council office on. But at this point, we don't know where those projects will be.
Yeah, at our last commission meeting, we did discuss those projects.
Just, I haven't had a chance to mention this to you, but I have a telephone appointment with Commissioner Fuentes to discuss this on Thursday, and you and I should talk before that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. Does that subsume both the presentation and the filing, or not? No, we have a filing, 29B, Renewable Portfolio Standard Projects Update.
And that's just a filing. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to respond.
No questions, apparently. Okay, Council, would you say whatever magic words you need to say to move us into closed session?
So at this point, we will recess into closed session in accordance with the California Government Code and report any final action taken therein.
Thank you. We will recess into closed session.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Renee, representing for Juventus from Van Nuys. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35, our city, our channel.
In November 2012, work commenced on the largest and most ambitious runway maintenance project at Van Nuys Airport in over half a century, a $20.5 million plan to rehabilitate its historic 8,000-foot main runway, 16 right, in just 9 months. A runway where state-of-the-art business jets destined for distant corners of the world arrive and depart 24 hours a day. At an airport where more general aviation aircraft take off and land than almost anywhere on Earth. The mission? Modernize the runway to meet current Federal Aviation Administration design standards, achieve a 20-year lifespan, and preserve Van Nuys Airport's world-class status. The challenge? Dramatically limit the number of days the runway will be closed or shortened during construction, keeping Van Nuys Airport tenants open for business.
This project here represents the largest single project on the field in over 50 years here at Van Nuys Airport. And what makes that unique is that we've had to work closely with the tenants to ensure that there was a balance between their need to have the runway available for as much of the time during the project as possible, with our need to ensure that we did that project correctly and safely.
This runway, since its original construction, has only seen slight maintenance, but this is a true rebuild. We're rebuilding this runway to last for 20 years, and it should last for 20 years given regular maintenance.
The type of aircraft that use Van Nuys Airport are jet aircraft, propeller aircraft, and helicopters. And all the aircraft that are based here at Van Nuys Airport are privately owned by individuals or businesses.
Through the ingenuity of engineers and months of collaboration with stakeholders, work was carefully designed and aggressively phased to minimize operational impacts to the fullest extent possible.
It's not too difficult to actually design a replacement for a runway, but runways, by their nature, are the most important thing on any airfield. And so anytime you take the runway out of service to rebuild it, it has significant impacts to the community, all the pilots who operated on it, and the airport itself.
A potential runway closure of up to 17 weeks was minimized to 10 days and 26 nights for rehabilitation work. Founded in 1928, Van Nuys Airport is a place where America's early flight pioneers proved that aviation could cross the ocean and bridge the world.
I remember when I was the youngest pilot around here flying sophisticated airplanes, and now I'm definitely the oldest. This transition from a small airplane airport to a corporate airplane airport. As a matter of fact, there's more corporate airplanes on Van Nuys than any other airport in the world.
As the nation's leading business airport, it's a valued economic and community resource, serving private, government, and corporate aviation needs. Van Nuys Airport is home to nearly 700 aircraft, from single-engine Cessnas to Boeing business jets, on 730 acres of land.
Van Nuys is unique in the sense that it is uniquely dedicated to these types of aircraft. And we want to make sure that all of the players who were involved in not only getting the planes on and off the ground, but maintaining these planes have a venue that is second to none.
Each year, the airport supports over 12,300 jobs and contributes more than $1 billion to the Southern California economy.
It provides jobs, it provides work for people in the surrounding community, and it provides a lot of money to the surrounding areas who do business there.
It's also distinguished as one of the world's busiest general aviation airports, averaging more than 340,000 annual operations.
Van Nuys Airport is the world-class airport in terms of facilities and amenities that are offered to a variety of the flying public. We offer services to many types of companies, corporate flight departments, movie studios, businesses that need to get from point A to point B on demand. And that's what sets us apart, because we can do that unlike any other airport here in the region.
Van Nuys Airport's mark on aviation history is unrivaled. The spirit of creativity and craftsmanship that gave birth to the airport over 85 years ago remains strong today. Rehabilitation work was carefully phased to minimize the time runway 16 right would be closed or shortened. Operations on Van Nuys Airport's 4,000-foot parallel runway, used mainly by propeller aircraft, were not impacted. However, the lack of secondary runway to handle the majority of jet operations required a unique design, varying pavement sections, and creative phasing.
The phasing on this project was very unique. We had to actually kind of break it into 3 distinct work areas. What we're doing is actually shortening the runway, which based on the current fleet and the planes that operate there, they can operate on a 5,000-foot runway. But today it's an 8,000-foot runway. So we're going to shorten the runway and move it to the south end and do construction on the north. We'll then do the same thing, move the runway north, do construction on the south, and then there'll be one closure in the middle for 10 days where we'll address the middle portion of the runway in a very accelerated construction.
The project included improvements and installation of a new blast fence at the run-up area, repairs to existing concrete runway ends and shoulder pavements, high-speed exit light modifications, and new pavement markings.
We're standing on the north end of runway 16 right at Van Nuys, and today's the first day of runway reconstruction. The contractor is currently removing all the asphalt pavement between us and a blast fence, which is located about 3,000 feet down the runway. It'll take him a couple days to remove the asphalt, and then he'll continue to dig down about 2 more feet, and then he'll be building it back with our pavement section. Over the last few days, we've actually shortened the runway overnight. First night, it was a matter of setting up some temporary electrical stuff that would give the pilots visual cues. And then the next couple nights, we actually remarked the entire runway and then set up the blast fence to protect the construction site. So the runway went from 8,000 feet 2 days ago to now 5,000 feet.
A combination of asphalt overlay and partial reconstruction was phased over the runway's north, south, and center sections.
During preliminary engineering, we went out and cored along the length of the runway. And this is just the top portion of one of the cores from the middle of the runway. If you can imagine, this is actually 4 times thicker of asphalt in real life. And we were actually surprised by this. No one would have guessed that the middle of the runway was 17 inches thick of asphalt. And what we're guessing based on record drawings and all the information we have is that that original thickness of asphalt was actually the original runway from the 30s. And since then, the runway has been overlaid until it's gotten to the surface height where it is today. We're in phase 4 of the runway 16 right reconstruction. Over the past 75 days, we've been doing prep work that's gotten us to this point. We now have the runway closed for 10 consecutive days. We're in day 2 of this closure, and our contractor is currently finishing up excavation here on the south and has already started paving operations on the north side of the phase.
Amassing 2,000 hours of construction in 267 calendar days, runway rehabilitation was completed on time and on budget, using 8 acres of infield grass, enough to cover 6 football fields, 57,600 linear feet of electrical cable, more than 6 times the length of the Golden Gate Bridge, and 60,000 tons of asphalt, an amount sufficient to pave over 7 miles of a 4-lane highway. Rehabilitation and improvement of Van Nuys Airport's primary runway, 16 right, allows airport users to experience an even higher level of world-class service and facilities than ever before. This more than $20 million investment in the airport's infrastructure ensures that aircraft, from single-engine planes to multi-engine business jets, move quickly, safely, and efficiently. It also promotes business growth and maintains Van Nuys Airport's role as a powerful economic engine.
This is the premier GA airport in the Southern California area. And without it, many companies don't have alternates to use nearby. They have to look at places outside of the region to operate, which is really just not feasible for many companies.
Whether you're a pilot or passenger, Van Nuys Airport is committed to offering the most distinctive flight experience possible. A legacy of excellence, a design for the future, a world-class airport. Van Nuys Airport.
G'day, Troy McCubbin from North Hollywood. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35, our city, our channel.
Today is Wednesday, May 21st. It is Budget Day. And we will be starting shortly. I'm going to wait a couple of minutes for a few other members, and we're doing some paperwork at this time. I do want to announce to the people that are here that any public comment where it relates to the budget, we took all of that yesterday. So there will be no public comment today where it relates to the budget actions that we will take. So if you're here waiting to speak, again, we already satisfied that requirement. I wanted to make that announcement in case somebody wanted to leave early. You're welcome to stay, and we'd like for you to stay the entire time if you like. And I just want to announce, members, if there are any last-minute conversations that you'd like to have, then you want to have those discussions now, because we'll have a couple of minutes before we actually get started. So with that said, if we can get Channel 35 to just pan some shots of these people working, that's what we'll do. Okay, good morning. If I can have members take your seats. Or should I just say, Mr. Labange, take your seat? Again, today is Wednesday, May 21st. I want to welcome all of the public here and briefly explain to the members that we're going to go through this page by page. On every page, there'll be a certain number of items. As we go through the page, if you want to call something special, you can. We will go through the entire budget. And then once we do that, we'll go back and go through the individual items that were held. I want to, in advance, thank everybody from the staff for all of the work that you've done, the various departments. I do want to thank Mr. Krikorian and the budget team for a lot of hard work, over 40 hours reviewing this and taking statements. And so I'm just really proud of the great work that you've done. So with that said, I think that it would be appropriate for me to turn it over to Mr. Krikorian that will give us more details where it relates to how we're going to, Mr. Labarne.
Excuse me, Mr. President. First, should I call the roll? Bloomingfield, Bond,
I didn't do that.
Englander, Fuentes, Weezer, Carrasco, Krikorian, Labange, Martinez, O'Farrell, Parks, Price, Weston. 14 members present. A quorum, Mr. President.
Bad president for not calling the roll. Okay, Mr. Krikorian.
Well, thank you very much, President and Mr. President. Let me first echo your thanks to everyone who was involved with this, and the CAO's office, the CLA's office, the mayor and his budget team led by Rick Cole, and all of our departmental staff and our individual staffs, and of course the members of the Budget and Finance Committee who have really done yeoman's work to try to get us to this point. And I want to take one moment before we talk about this budget to step back for a moment and remind all of us that 4 years ago, in 2010, when I joined the council, the CAO was projecting that this fiscal year that we're preparing the budget for right now would include a budget deficit of over $1.1 billion. In a $4.5 billion general fund, we were facing a $1.1 billion deficit. And in the 4 years in the 4 years since then, through extensive efforts by the mayor, by two mayors, and by this city council, by departmental staff and our general managers, we've managed to, and significantly by our partners in labor as well, who've participated with us in reducing costs and deferring cost increases, we've been able to whittle that billion-dollar deficit down year by year through a combination of cost reductions, economic activity, pension reform, finding efficiencies within our departments. We've been able to eliminate that $1.1 billion in this budget that's before you today. That's a remarkable achievement from a time just 4 years ago when people were seriously, not us, but others out in the public, were seriously talking about whether or not the city might be heading towards bankruptcy. In fact, we didn't even use the B word. But now it's clearly not the case. This city has gone far in recovering. We're on our way back. And we're on our way back to starting to restore services back to where our constituents deserve them to be. That being said, the battle's not completely done. We are still projecting structural deficits continuing on for another 2 or 3 budget years following this, depending on how things go. So we have to continue to be disciplined. We have to continue to do the good work that we've been doing. But I do just want to highlight a few things that are contained in this budget that's before you. And members, we're going to be working off the Budget and Finance Committee's memo that was delivered to each of you on Friday. So we're going to be going through it, as the President said, on a page-by-page basis and taking all of your specific comments and concerns as to it. But I just want to highlight a couple of things in this. First of all, even in this continuing budget challenge, we've continued to maintain a reserve fund of over 5%. This is until last year, we had never achieved that 5% goal for at least several decades. 2 years in a row now, we are above 5% with our reserve fund, and we've continued to grow our budget stabilization fund to be able to weather difficult times in the future. In addition to that, in this budget, we're adding $10 million more to the fire department, $3.5 million for essential life-saving equipment, much of which was already obsolete, $3 million for new firefighter hiring, and $3 million for enhanced ambulance services as well. In addition to that, on the public safety front, we've added 8 new prosecutors in the city attorney's office. So we've fully funded now the neighborhood prosecutor program. In addition to that, we've added prosecutors who are going to be focusing on Measure D enforcement. In terms of street repair and infrastructure, this budget funds 2,400 miles of street repairs, 350,000 pothole repairs, and $20 million to fund repairs to Los Angeles' sidewalks. We've added $5 million to clean up streets that are blighted with bulky item pickup and other kinds of cleanup. And in addition, we have $2 million devoted to maintaining medians and enhancing neighborhoods, and $1 million restored for graffiti abatement. We've added funding for parks, almost $2 million for park enhancements, and we've continued to do the work that we have done over the last several years to preserve essential social programs like our senior meals program, the AIDS coordinator, services in our Department of Disabilities that otherwise would have been cut because of federal cuts in funding. So all of that and more is in the budget report that's before you. So with that, with those highlights, I'd like to turn it over to the CLA, Jerry Miller. Mr. Miller.
Good morning. I'll be very brief. I did want to start out by, since this is my last budget, truly thanking the mayor's office, the CO's office, all the department staff, and of course...
You didn't know we were going to bring you back next year, you know, kicking and screaming, so technically it's...
In any case, and my incredible staff in putting this together, Sharon and Karen and Roy and Maria and Jack Reef and Donna, everyone is really, really terrific. So I'm just going to talk about process for a few minutes and then step back and let Karen walk you through the report. When you have, again, you'll be going through the report, calling items special, and then approving the items on consent on a page-by-page basis. Then you're going to come back and discuss the items that you've called special. Once you're done with that, we will start going through motions. I appreciate very much the motions that we got in advance. We're in excess of 30 so far. A number of motions are still coming in this morning. So I will say, and we're certainly very sensitive of your time, if you're submitting motions today, I've told my staff that when they bring them out for signature, they're to stay here and not go back to the room without the motions signed and seconded. Because once they go back there, we have to number them, we have to log them in, we have to copy them, we have to put packages together, and then they have to come out to you to be heard. What's happened in the past is the council's had to recess for as much as an hour so that we could actually process motions and get them out before you. So we really do want to try and keep things moving. So I would ask that you, make sure that your staff is ready to get the motions assigned and seconded as soon as they do come out. The last two motions you're going to see are motions A and B, which are the closing motions. Now, finally, after you're done today, the actual budget resolution will come back to you next week. That's the document that actually goes to the mayor. That's usually that's a routine document. Essentially, it just memorializes the mayor's budget and what occurred today. And finally, what's before you today for the public and for anybody that's new are changes to the mayor's budget. If there are issues in the mayor's budget that are not addressed here, what that means is that the budget committee has left them alone and they will go forward as the mayor proposed. So with that, again, we're here to help. I'll be wandering around helping with motions and answering questions, and I will turn it over to Karen to go through the report.
Good morning, Mr. President and members. Karen Calfine with the CLA's office. So what I'll be doing is going through the committee report with you. The first part of the committee report, the first 25 pages, is just a summary of what the Budget and Finance Committee discussed. So I'll go straight to the recommendations, and that starts after the signature page, and at the bottom of the page it says page 1 of 25. So it starts with global recommendations. And on page 1 of that section, recommendations 1 through 4. And again, what we'll do is we'll go page by page. If there's anything that you want to call special, you can just highlight that, and then we can come back to it later. If there's a clarifying question, we can certainly go through those quickly if there's a clarifying question. Otherwise, we'll just run through and then highlight those that you want to come back and discuss. So back on page 1, recommendations 1 through 4.
Any specials 1 through 4, members?
Sure.
What was that?
Sure, I'm looking for the 1 to 4. Thank you. Thank you.
You got it?
Correct.
Mr. Koretz.
I'd like to call number 4 special.
4 special. Let's vote on the remaining.
Number 2 special.
2 and 4. Let's vote on the remaining. Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. Page 2, recommendations 5 through 7.
Okay. No specials. Then let's vote on these items. We're on page 2, 5 through 7. Let us open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Karen, back to you.
Page 3, recommendations 8 and 9.
Members, Mr. Koretz.
I don't know if I need to call this special or just ask that on number 8 that reports E, F, and G be referred to the PAW committee.
Actually, these are components of the financial status reports. So this is just talking about what components go in the financial status reports and then go to the Budget and Finance Committee and to the full council after that.
So I'd like to ask that they also be referred to Personnel Committee.
I don't see a problem in that. Okay, let's prepare to vote on that. Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
I think we're on page 4.
Yes. Page 4, recommendations 10 through 12.
Specials. I don't see any. Let's vote on those. Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Page 5.
Page 5, recommendations 13 through 16.
Members 13 through 16. Let's vote on these items. Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Karen.
Page 6, recommendations 17 through 25.
Okay, members, 17, page 6, 17 through 25. Let us open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Next.
Page 7, recommendations 26 through 33.
26 through 33, no specials. Let's prepare to vote on this. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Can we hold the roll. I mean, he may have come in just under the wire. So let's hold his item. What was that, 26?
Yes, sir. 26.
And let's again vote on the other items. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate.
14 ayes.
Let's go move on.
Okay, page 8, recommendations 34 through 37.
Okay, members.
35.
35 for Joey B. Let's prepare to vote. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Next page.
Page 9, recommendations 38 through 42.
Ms. Martinez? 38 for Ms. Martinez. Okay, let's prepare to vote on those items. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Next.
Page 10, recommendations 43 through 48.
Okay, members, okay, let's vote on this one as well. Let's open the roll, close it, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Let's move on.
Page 11, recommendations 49 through 57.
Mr. Buscaino.
53 and 54, Mr. President.
53 and 54. Mr. Labange.
Just want to thank you for 51 on behalf of all the parkways in the city of Los Angeles.
Okay, let's prepare to vote. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Next.
Page 12, excuse me, page 12, recommendations 58 through 64.
Okay, let's prepare to vote on these items. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Let's move on.
Page 13, recommendations 65 through 70.
70 for Mr. Fuentes. Let's vote on the remaining items. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Let's continue.
Page 14, recommendations 71 through 76.
Let's vote on these items. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Next.
Page 15, recommendations 77 through 79.
Ms. Martinez.
79F.
79F. Mr.
77. 77.
77. So you and Labange are in some mild competition. Is that? You deferred to Mr. Buscaino. That was very nice of you.
We speak for the trees.
Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Next.
On page 16, recommendations 80 through 83A.
Okay, let's prepare to vote on those. Let's open the roll.
Excuse me, Mr. President. Page 16, 79.
Oh, right. I and J.
Okay, so let's vote on the remaining. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote. That brings us.
14 eyes.
That brings us where?
To page 17, recommendations 83B through G.
We can vote on that now. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Next.
Page 18, recommendations 83H through N.
All righty. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Next.
Page 19, recommendations 83O through U.
Okay, let's vote on these items. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Okay. Page 20, recommendations 83V through CC.
All right. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Next.
Page 21, recommendations 84 through 92.
Okay, on these items, let's prepare to vote as well. Let us open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Let's continue.
Page 22, recommendations 93 through 100.
We can vote on these items as well. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Okay.
Page 23, recommendations 101 through 108.
All righty, members. Let's prepare to vote on these items. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Okay. Page 24, recommendations 109 through 116.
115. Item 115.
115 for Mr. Buscaino. Let's vote on the remaining items. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate.
14 eyes.
And next.
Page 25, recommendations 117 through 125.
On these items, let's open the roll, close the roll, Tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Okay. The remaining part of the report is attachment A.
Yeah,
and-
you know what I want to do on that, if it's amenable. I'd like to vote on all of the report backs at one time. So proceed. Those are report backs from what to what?
It's R1 through R230, and that's all in attachment A.
All right. Then let's open the roll. What? Madam Clerk? Is there a technical... Oh, I'm moving too fast? Are we ready? Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Okay.
Okay, why don't we begin going back through the items that were held. And members, we do have refreshments. Mr. Koretz, is that an accident?
Yes.
Okay. So we will remove you from the queue. And let's start with our...
So the first item called special was item 2 by Mr. Labange.
Mr. Labange.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. CAO, several years ago, there was a CAO, and I said, here we do the budget, and we concentrate on that, and we have this day that we really roll up our sleeves and figure the budget. And I said and suggested that 6 months from now, in October, we should have an infrastructure focus. Because all this talent out here, all this dedicated service to the city by these managers and staff of the city, we don't take enough time to breathe. So my question is, Mr. President, can I make a friendly amendment that in 6 months from now and every October to the end of time that we have an infrastructure focus where both water and power comes in, where both the port comes in, where both the Department of Airports comes in, as well as all the departments on the big infrastructure. If we don't take time for the big things don't happen as fast. I need a second.
I'll second that.
Still fine. Took a little while. The council meeting was appreciated for that, Mr. Weston. Thank you. So we got October members where we just focus on infrastructure. Mr. CAO, some comments on that. You're an expert.
We do.
You don't have to force him, but go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Certainly, we'll be happy to provide any support for a discussion around infrastructure. In addition to what we already provided, everything from SOSLA to looking at the proprietary. So we'll be happy to provide that support.
Previously, members, and I'm doing this for the benefit of the people who are new here, Herb, there used to be a book called the Capital Improvement Book, and you could follow it and you could see the work done. And under Mr. Reardon's time, they got rid of the book because they said, we're not getting the work done. And so I'm just trying to say you could focus, because all of a sudden it's going to be 2017 or 2022 or 2026, and it does go fast. So if you have an infrastructure day in the fall, complementary to a budget day here, you're able to achieve things in your districts that you want to get. Thank you for that, Mr. Weston. I hope we get an aye vote when we vote on it.
If that's fine with Mr. Krikorian, let us open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 eyes.
Okay, members, if you have any motions, I urge you to get them in as soon as possible. Karen, if we could go to the next.
Yeah, the next item was item 4, called special by Mr. Koretz.
Mr. Koretz, item 4 on page 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thought it was at least worth some notation and a little bit of discussion on this item because I think managed hiring has been sort of a mixed blessing. I think it was critical when we were doing so badly financially that we were talking about bankruptcy, not us, but others. I think now we have our budget process much more under control. I think that managed hiring all the way through, but probably more so now, I think creates inefficiencies and is not of as great value as it was when we were in more difficult financial shape. I still hear about it with some frequency from department heads where there are things that need to happen and they are slowed down and we're not very nimble and we're not able to address things timely because of managed hiring. And the question is whether in our present financial circumstance, whether managed hiring is still of enough value to keep that process in place. We've obviously recognized this to some degree, and I appreciate it that we've softened our hiring freeze. We've created an expedited unfreeze process. So we obviously recognize this to some degree as well. I'd just like to hear from the CAO, from the CLA, whether they've really analyzed whether this is still a process that's necessary.
Mr. CAO.
So you're absolutely correct that managed hiring has been a critical component to the point that we are now, where we could actually see the light at the end of the tunnel. Unfortunately, we still have a few more years to go before we actually reach a point of ongoing surplus. And if you could see in the forecast, we still are anticipating a deficit next year, the year after that, and the year after that. But having certainly heard the concerns from the committee as well as that of general managers, we've been working with the CLA. We'll be submitting a report probably within the next 2 weeks with revisions to the managed hiring process, where we're encouraging departments to submit their proposals even before the new fiscal year begins, so that managed hiring could give a blanket unfreeze, particularly those that are special funded. The difficulty with eliminating it altogether is that managed hiring is one of the only institutions within the city that could take a macro look at what's happening. So as a way of avoiding layoffs in some departments, displacements, as a way of ensuring that we end the year in the black and are responding to any changes in revenue, managed hiring continues to be an unfortunate part of the city's reality. So we would recommend continuing with managed hiring, a revised version of that, which we'll be submitting to the Budget and Finance Committee and then to the full council.
Okay, then, Mr. Koretz.
Well, I'm not going to make a motion to change it, but I think at some point, I agree we're not at the position where we're out of the woods, but whether we're close enough to look at returning the ability for managers to manage to their budget as opposed to having to watch to avoid every misstep because we're in such bad financial shape, I think we should take a look at it. So if I could ask us to actually do a little more analysis and come back with a report after the second FSR this year, actually documenting the need for continued managed hiring, I would appreciate that.
Mr. CAO, can that be done?
Absolutely.
All right, Mr. Labange.
Set up, and I thank you for all that you do, but I hear what Paul's saying, Mr. Koretz. Is there one CAO, like an assistant CAO, who could be like the marshal that looks at something and says, you know what, we don't need to go through the hearing? I mean, it could sign off like a sign-off instead of a process. Yet when there's the bigger things that you needed in, that you need to go through a process?
The managed hiring consists of 3 offices: my office, the mayor's office, and the CLA. It's operated by consensus. My office has to go through managed hiring. I can't unilaterally exempt my own office.
Got it.
So it's a consensus approach. And again, if you look at the actual data, managed hiring has overwhelmingly approved most of the requests that are made. And so, and again, we're actually planning on submitting a report prior to the end of the fiscal year to further expedite this process.
Good. Okay, you're on it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Koretz again?
Oh, just to that point, the fact is they do approve most of the requests. So in my view, it's somewhat of a bureaucratic slowdown that I think is becoming less and less necessary. The requests, I think, are approved in a higher percentage. I just think we're slowing down our effectiveness and making ourselves much less nimble by continuing to do that. So I actually like Mr. Labange's suggestion. I wonder if you could take a look at that as well when you come back with your report at mid-year.
We'll report on that as well.
Okay, let's prepare to vote. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
So does that bring us to item 26, Mr. Buscaino?
Mr. President, thank you.
Well, let me make sure I'm right in that. We're right. Okay, it is.
Thank you.
You're up.
Questions I had were already addressed and answered. I just wanted to thank and identify the importance of having increased enforcement of Measure D. I was just in Wilmington last night, and the Wilmington community is just outraged. A number of these green crosses keep coming up, popping up. So I want to thank the committee and the city attorney for fighting for these positions through the Neighborhood Prosecutor Program. So you mentioned it in your opening statement, Mr. Krikorian. Thanks for restoring some of these positions. So I'm good with this. Thank you.
You made a good point, Mr. Buscaino. Let's prepare to vote on that issue. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay, that moves us on to what, 35?
35.
And that's Mr. Buscaino as well. Item 35.
Yes, concerning the expediting of the hiring process for the additional class ordered by the budget modification, has there been a final status determination for the class that's been dismissed prior to the start of training and the class alternatives? Do we know? Those who already been in the process and been identified and ready, I'm sure like other members have been getting a ton of emails and letters about those firefighter positions, the candidates that have already been identified. What are we doing with them?
There has not been a determination yet in terms of the people who were in process. We are still waiting for the study to come back from RAND with regard to
Would they have to reapply? We don't know.
It is uncertain at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's vote on that item. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay, that brings us to 38, but it's my understanding that concerns where related to 38 have been answered. So we can,
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's vote on that item. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
So does that now bring us to 53?
Correct.
Mr. Buscaino, item 53.
Thank you. This item deals directly with the HACLA sites and the programming for recreation and parks. I'd just like to know more about the programming at these 4 sites, if we have staff here. And we need to develop a long-term strategy. It seems like every year we're looking for these dollars, and if we can look at a long-term strategy to fund the programming to ensure it continues beyond this fiscal year. Just want to know what we're doing on our part.
Yeah, just with regard to addressing this on a full-time or on a permanent basis, there is in the back a special study that would address that very thing, is like find a permanent solution to this issue. So in the back, it's a report.
Very good. Thanks to the committee for addressing this as well. Thank you.
Okay, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
54, Mr. Buscaino, and stop me if I mess up the order.
On item 54, continuing the funding for supplemental maintenance of park facilities citywide, we wanted to make sure that Leland Park, that we just broke ground, years ago, the city, prior to my arrival, the city cut the funding for programming and did not have a director there, did not have staff there, and all of a sudden this park fell apart. Drug, sex, and rock and roll at this park, and here we are now finding the dollars to rebuild that park. We have Dodger Dream Foundation coming in, and we've had a number of San Pedro residents that have been working hard. Just want to be able to to make sure that all this work goes, we want to make sure that this work doesn't go to waste moving forward. We're putting in nearly $1 million in working with Mike Scholl and his department. I just want to make sure we keep the restoration going and ensure that we have programming at this park at Leland Park and San Pedro. Because if not, we're taking a step back. And
I don't believe Leland Park is one of the park sites, but we can certainly work with the department to ensure that it is adequately addressed as part of this budget.
Okay, I had the commitment from the recreation parks and Mike
And
Scholl
that could
department.
be, and if Mike Scholl is here, he can probably speak to that.
Okay.
Mr. Labange, wait a second.
CAO, because a good point, not only on this, but other facilities like libraries, city, police stations. And is there enough money for rec and parks? Because they take care of the public lands, not just the public parks. Could you answer that for the council?
Certainly. This budget continues asking Rec and Parks to provide that kind of support for city facilities. There is a special study that's requesting that we look at a different model to ensure that they're adequately maintained. So that's something we'll be looking at throughout the course of the year. But the funding stays the same as it was last year.
When we're talking facilities, we're talking restrooms, talking about rec rooms. We're not specifically talking about fields.
This funding here is, there was one-time funding that was put in the budget last year of $500,000. The budget did not include continuing of that funding. The CLA and the committee proposed adding that funding back. So the same parks that were maintained this current fiscal year will continue to be maintained next fiscal year. And again, you're correct, it involves cleaning of the restrooms and the facilities themselves.
Very good.
At Rec and Park facilities.
And this specific park that I'm speaking about needs those maintenance dollars to keep it going. Thank you.
And Councilmember, we did.
Mr. Labange.
CAO, on that, does the Parks Department, if I'm a Parks Department person, and I clean a park here and a library here, or do they just, is there a separate crew that does all the public facilities?
We could certainly ask the department to respond to that question.
To define that, because I think it's very important.
We could explain that in our report back. As we look at whether this model is the most effective model, we could report back on the current structure and then propose an alternative structure if necessary.
All right, good. Thank you.
Okay, let's prepare to vote. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay, I believe this brings us to Mr. Fuentes on item 70. Felipe.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me begin by thanking the Budget Committee and the Public Safety Committee, its chairs, obviously, for all of their hard work. I understand that there's a recommendation 230 to look at developing a strategy to deal with the banked overtime. But colleagues, I think this is an important enough area for the city of Los Angeles that we need to spend a little time understanding what the next 30, 60, 90 days look like. It's my sense here that there's a couple of things that are happening here. And before I sort of tell you, Mr. CAO, what it is that I think, as a matter of percentage of the overall general fund, what does this department, LAPD, consume?
Well, all of public safety, including fire, represents over 70% of the general fund.
So 70% of our general fund. And so the existing liability, or I should say the banked overtime situation that we're dealing with, how do we account for that? My concern is that, the rank and file deserves a tremendous amount of gratitude from the city of Los Angeles. It's been my experience as an observer that the city of Los Angeles and the police department and its sworn personnel have really helped us essentially finance this critical service delivery. In many years, they give us a certain amount allotment. Granted, it's through the contract negotiations, but they give us an allotment of overtime to deal with making sure that we have as much deployment as possible to make sure that Los Angeles is safe. And that number has hovered over time. But today we find ourselves in a situation where we have about $116 million liability to these sworn officers. July 1st, if we don't ratify a new negotiated contract, our ability to essentially finance that service delivery drops to about 150 hours. Now, I understand that maybe in some ways that happening on the natural is probably a good thing to keep us all honest. But my question is more centered on what it means for deployment. There's been a historical sort of desire for Los Angeles under different administrations and different leaders to want to attain a certain level of sworn personnel on the ready at all times. And I think that's one way to measure our ability to keep Los Angeles safe. But from a deployment perspective, what do we do in the next 30, 60, 90 days? I understand that we've got to get through the negotiations, but I'm terribly concerned. I'm finding that we have to, as a matter of course, dip into different sort of discretionary funds to begin to make sure that we get certain types of service or focus on service in these areas funded by council offices. Now, I don't have a problem with that, whether it's a specialized group of folks looking at outrageous parties in the Northeast San Fernando Valley or a specialized group dealing with the human trafficking and prostitution in the San Fernando Valley. It seems to me that these ought to be a matter of our sort of regular deployment schedules and focus. But I don't know what happens in the next 30, 60, or 90 days, and I don't know that I can wait to hear another budget committee come back to hear about recommendation 230. What's our game plan in the short term?
Well, the committee spent a lot of time talking about this issue, and it's something that my office raised, and I think the CLA shares the same concern. It's something we're just going to have to monitor very closely. You are correct. The ability to bank hours will be significantly reduced to 150 on July 1st. There will be an existing bank of about 115, 120 million that we don't have to pay immediately, but it grows over time as people get promoted and if there's any future raises that are granted. And so at the end, there's only really two options. One is paying more cash overtime, or the second is not using overtime. And so the department's going to have to manage and reconcile that. Now, we're hoping that some of that could be mitigated through negotiations, and those are ongoing, and we're optimistic on the progress we're making. But it's something that we're going to be reporting on at every FSR. The amount allocated for cash overtime is approximately $30 million for next fiscal year. To put that in context, the last time that the city could only bank up to 150 hours, the city was spending well over $100 million in cash overtime. So that $30 million is, just by the expectation that existed before, is significantly less than what would be required. But I wish I had a more simple answer for you. It's one of these things that we're just going to have to watch carefully.
So the recommendation, I think, and rightfully we need to focus on sort of the fiscal impact, how we buy down some of that debt that we've accrued. I don't know how we account for it in the budget process, and I think that's something that's important for us to recognize. But what I think that I'm getting to is that I don't understand how we manage the deployment. Is it an opportunity for us to look at how it is that we currently deploy forces? Is it an opportunity for us to really rethink some of the things that we've agreed to with the department? It's not to say that I don't think that a 312 or a 410 or a regular work schedule is the way to go, but if we have a choice of having to pay overtime or not having folks deployed, it doesn't seem like in between there, rather, it seems like in between there ought to be some sort of flexibility by management or some other strategy. And so I don't want to just focus on the fiscal aspect of it. I'm concerned about what it means with boots on the ground. You know, colleagues, I think that our challenge is really highlighted in this budget process. On the one hand, we've got a fire department who is begging for more classes because they don't want to work more overtime and they're exhausted. On the other hand, we've got a police department who we owe a tremendous amount of overtime. And somewhere in between these bookends, I think there needs to be a strategy to deal not just with the fiscal part, and thank you so much to the committee for acknowledging that that's a looming debt that we owe, but it's the deployment that I'm concerned about. The adoption of CompStat and the performance-based budgeting, I think, is a really interesting sort of concept to want to deploy when we're managing these resources. But ultimately, it's about effect. Are we making sure that folks are safe? We're dealing with a structural deficit on a global basis. I don't want to see a deepening deficit strategy for these individual departments, and I'm terribly concerned. So I'm looking with great anticipation to your report back and monitoring the committee to see what it is that we're going to do to deal with the fiscal and the deployment. Thank you.
Mr. Huizar and then Mr. Englander. Mr. Huizar.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I share the same concerns that Mr. Fuentes does. And I don't think we've budgeted this way in the past for overtime, or if somebody could refresh my memory. I think what I'm concerned about is that we will get this huge bill in the first FSR that we may not have anticipated. So I understand budgeting is a lot of forecasting and assumptions that we make, but on this one, it's one of those where I'm afraid to even assume how much we maybe get billed for in the first FSR. And so, first of all, my first question is: have we budgeted like this before in the past for overtime? And secondly, should we be as concerned as Mr. Fuentes and I are about this right now?
At least for the last few years, because we were able to bank at a higher number, the most that we budgeted was about $20 million of overtime. Yeah. The last time our ability was limited to only 150 hours, we spent well over $100 million of cash overtime. My office recommended budgeting at least $65 million for cash overtime in this budget, and because of other priorities, that wasn't feasible. And so I share your concern that it's something we're going to have to watch carefully. Ultimately, the issues of deployment, that's at the discretion exclusively of the chief, and the chief is going to have to manage the $30 million he has for cash overtime, the reduced ability to bank hours at 150, and at the same time the demand that exists in the community. And so the city hasn't been in this position before where we weren't budgeting where we budget at such a low level given the limited threshold. And so because negotiations aren't done, some of the solution could be achieved through the ability to bank a greater number, but we haven't resolved that yet. So again, it's one of these things that we're just going to have to carefully monitor. But we share your concern, and it's something we're going to be reporting directly on.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Englander.
Yeah, I want to thank Councilmember Fuentes for bringing this up. We had a lot of in-depth conversation during our budget deliberations on this very issue, and discussed the idea that this isn't simply kicking the can down the road, it's kicking the snowball down the road. As it gets further out, it gets bigger. It grows exponentially, and it's something we've got to get our arms around and deal with. We asked for extensive reports back. We will be bringing that back to Budget and Finance Committee, as well as Public Safety. We talked about that as well. In terms of deployment, the effects, the cost, the liability of this bank, and how to deal with it. Mr. Blumenfeld brought up some ideas on looking at the idea of restructuring the debt. We're going to be looking at all of those elements that we have to look at. This is something that has been created and inherited and passed down that we've got to deal with and look at it from that perspective, from public safety and financially. So I really do appreciate that you brought this up. This is one of the biggest issues in terms of law enforcement, policing, and the budget that we've got to deal with. And we'll be spending a lot of time this next fiscal year and a lot of meetings and a lot of discussion and how best to move forward in a very sound financial manner and one that doesn't impede on public safety. So really truly appreciate that you brought it up. Thank you.
Mr. Fuentes.
So the $65 million that was deleted, what is it that we are paying towards the outstanding liability?
So for the current fiscal year, $15 million were put aside to reduce down the bank.
So 15, 1-5?
1-5.
Very good.
So that was done earlier in the fiscal year. The $30 million that's put aside for overtime doesn't specify whether or not it should be used to buy down the bank or whether it should be used for cash overtime. Given what a low number it is, my recommendation would be that it be used to pay down for cash overtime in light of the fact that our threshold to bank hours is reduced. But that's ultimately something that we'll report back on and in collaboration with the chief.
The actual item 7 here says that we're going to retain 6 months of funding for direct costs related to the department's budget for police hiring. So how does that fit into the situation that we're dealing with now? Is this, and I understand that it's very expensive to sort of ramp up and wind down the hiring process. So is this, are we hiring police officers?
That's correct. This budget assumes that the workforce is maintained at 10,000 officers. What it does, it puts the second half of the fiscal year cost in the UB, in the same way that it was done this current fiscal year.
So we're funding police hiring, and we've got this outstanding liability. To me, that seems like there's an issue there that needs to be reconciled, understanding that there's a lot of cost associated with ramping up and winding down. So it begs the question, how effective are we hiring? Are we having full classes? Are we getting sort of a tremendous success out of it? Is that something that you can answer now? Do we have a full class currently enrolled?
We could certainly ask the personnel department to come in, but it's my understanding that we still haven't completed. We haven't been able to be on the schedule that was anticipated a year ago when the adopted was.
So that's to say that we don't have full classes. What is a typical class these days comprised of? How many sort of takers, and then how many folks sort of at the high end are able to successfully matriculate out of the system?
So Sandy Joe's here.
Typically, a class is about 40 to 50.
I'm having trouble hearing. I don't know if we can put the microphone closer to folks, or we can turn up the volume here.
Good morning, Sandy Jo MacArthur from the Police Department.
Good morning.
Good morning. I just want to verify I understand your question. The first, there's two parts to it. The first was, do we have a current class in the academy? And the answer to that is yes. We've been hiring for the last 3 months. We've hired a class each month. Generally, our optimum class is 40 to 45. The class we hired Monday was 33, but the numbers are starting to go up. For some time after the first of the year, we were hiring classes of 25 to 30, and now we're starting to see an increase through some of the work that personnel department and the police department has done to improve the recruiting process and also to expedite the hiring process, which has notoriously taken a long time, and we're trying to close the gap on that. I don't want to talk with my back to you. I'm sorry.
No worries. So it's to say that we don't have full classes currently, but we're working to try to maximize and use all of the capacity with candidates?
Yes. Our optimum class is 40 to 45. And if a class is less, if there's not enough people to hire, if it's under 25, we don't hire a class because it's just not, it's not smart to do that.
It's not worthwhile, right?
Correct. But we have been hiring a class every month because we've been getting additional numbers. So I'm not quite sure I understand the rest of the question.
So I guess what I'm getting at is that my concern is that we've got, this outstanding liability, and we're adding officers, and we're not paying debt down to manage the department. And I understand that we have to maintain the pipeline of officers because it's probably terribly expensive if we have to start all over a year from now. But that being said, is there a report back or studies being done to figure out how it is that we maximize the capacity of the classes so that we're running at 45, 44 candidates versus what we're doing now? Because to me, that's also a potential problem here. I mean, if we're going to run classes to save money, then we ought to get the best bang for our buck with the classes that we do have. And it sounds like we're running around 15 or 20% below what we should be running to maximize the class.
Just mentioned, we have been working very closely together to look at different ways to streamline and again we are getting a large number of candidates in at this time due to the increased recruitment efforts and some of the new things that we're doing. We are looking at different parts in the process to make sure that we move those candidates through in an efficient manner. So we've already been working on that, and there may even be, I think there's a special study in that is listed with regards to police hiring. So we are looking at all of these different issues because, again, it is expensive for the process itself, the testing process, as well as when the officer gets on board. So we're trying to be as efficient as possible. And as the chief just mentioned, we did start an expedited testing process where candidates can complete most of their test parts in 4 days, consecutive 4 days, and that has been a very good program. But again, we're looking at more and more ways of getting the candidates through fast, efficiently, and also cost-effective.
So does the report back include information on sort of the impediments to hiring? Because again, a tale of two departments. The fire department, you've got candidates that have reported in the Times, 30 seconds to be able to qualify to be candidates, and one department where we're struggling to get classes full, and we're hiring folks, and we've got this liability out there. I just don't. I need some clarity is all.
So item number 154 says, instruct the police department to report to the Public Safety Committee regarding the cost benefit of hiring fewer officers versus accruing overtime. The report should include the financial and operational impacts of having fewer officers and paying overtime in cash.
Very good. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Fuentes. And just to clarify, this item 70, the reason that the Budget and Finance Committee devoted 6 months of funding for police hiring and then the second 6 months funding to the UB was precisely so we could evaluate the exact questions that you're asking, and those will be included in the report to the Public Safety Committee.
Okay, let's, yes, go right ahead.
Mr. Santana, you indicated that there's $15 million set aside for police overtime.
There's $15 million in the base of the department and an additional 15 in the UB.
So, Mr. Fuentes, just to clarify that, because you had asked about that point, there's $15 million in the base budget for pay down of police overtime, but there's an additional $15 million in this budget in the UB that's intended for that, potentially for that purpose as well.
Thank you. Let's prepare to vote. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
Okay, that should bring us to 77.
Correct.
Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you. If I can have staff come forward from Bureau of Street Services on this item. Mr. Salcedo is here. This item before you, colleagues, is calling for a report back to my committee, the Public Works and Gain Reduction Committee, on the quality of contractors, compliance of city standards, contract costs, consolidation of services across departments. Mr. Salcedo, when do we expect this report to come to my committee?
Good morning, council members. Nazario Salcedo, Director of the Bureau of Street Services. I anticipate, council member, that we can have a report ready for you for your consideration within the next 2 weeks.
Fantastic. Appreciate your hard work here in the department. I think what we need to do is the Bureau needs a direction from this council on how to proceed in order to avoid the situation that we've had with sidewalks this last fiscal year, when we're scrambling to spend dollars that sat in the UB all year. So what I'd like to ask that when we look at the cost benefit analysis of using city employees versus contract, we need to compare apples for apples to ensure that it's a true comparison. And when that cost analysis is conducted, want to see the indirect and overhead costs of bidding, awarding, and administrating contracts. That all needs to be fostered in and factored into the comparison. Can we make that happen?
We will make it happen, Councilman.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huizar.
Thank you. And Mr. Salcedo, I think you guys in Street Services have done a phenomenal job overall. But one thing that has been my pet peeve these last 2 years has been our city's inability to trim trees in a expedited fashion. For the last 2 years, we've put funding in our budget to trim more trees, but for one reason or another, we haven't been able to execute that money and actually do the work. And that has led to a number of trees throughout my district and the city not getting the attention. We already have a unacceptable cycle, which is what, 12, 13 years before the trees get trimmed. But when we saw that a few years ago, we tried to address it by putting more money in the budget to address it. But for the past 2 years, we haven't been able to put that money to use, and it gets very frustrating. I've been promised over and over that we will do that in some parts of my district, and the latest is that it will get done before the end of this year, and we're actually just putting money to use that should have been used 2 years ago. So what assurances can we get here that even after we do transmit or transfer $2 million more, that these dollars will actually be used?
Well, Councilman, I fully understand your concerns. I live that predicament every single day. Unfortunately, the contracting process takes between 6 and 7 months before you can finalize. You can finally tell the contractor, go ahead and trim the trees. That is one of the reasons why this year is part of our proposed budget, and so your constituents and all of the constituents in the city of LA don't have to wait 7 months to see the first tree being trimmed. We provided a proposal in which we requested the utilization of $500,000 to be used on an overtime basis for all of you, so come July 1st, city forces can perform tree trimming as you need it. That means that you will have, come July 1st, 150 trees per council district in your pocket to use them at your discretion. So we can trim the trees come July 1st. Other than that, let me assure you, Councilman, that we are not returning any money. What is happening is that the activation of the contract comes on the latter part of the fiscal year, and then the contract is completed the following fiscal year. But no, we're not returning money, and no, trims are not getting untrimmed. What I'm trying to say is that, and I agree with you 100%, the process is so cumbersome that invades the following fiscal year.
Yeah, and we have so many contractual regulations and rules that we have to follow, but doesn't that beg the question that if that is so cumbersome and so problematic, one thing we can do is change those rules, or we could simply hire more in-house city personnel to do that. Have we thought of that and did a cost-benefit analysis of addressing this problem for the future and going in one of those two directions?
Yeah, that is an excellent strategy, and we have made that available. Needless to say, our resources are very limited right now. As you well know, we only have a handful of tree surgeons to perform emergency-related work. Just in the last 2 weeks, we are responding to over 1,100 tree-related emergencies in the last 2 weeks. So obviously, these individuals work hard Monday through Sunday. So the only time available that we have to perform tree trimming on demand is on weekends. And that's why we proposed the utilization of $500,000. Anything beyond $500,000 in a fiscal year, we need to hire additional resources. And we have the vacancies, we just need to hire the positions.
Great, thank you. We had a conversation earlier about the managed hiring. Hopefully they hear this conversation. So I think overall, thank you for your work. You and the division do an incredible job. I think, but this one area of tree trimming it's not so much, I mean, sidewalks, it's a matter of funding, and you just have to find the funding and some other public works jobs. On this one, it's just internally, we've had a severe inability to deliver when money's been available for the last 2 years. Thank you.
Mr. Labange.
Mr. CAO, is this a 100% to city forces, or does it include contract broad-based tree trimming?
Currently, it's done primarily through contracts, and that's one of the report backs to look at cost-benefit analysis of doing it in-house versus continuing with contracts.
In the past, we would go 60-40, 40-60, 30-70. Obviously, whatever's best for the people that we serve. I just want to let you know the trees did not get the memo. They are continuing to grow. And Mr. City Attorney, I don't know if there's a lot of Larry Parkers in the world, but a lot of trees have grown over the tri-lights. That's another word for traffic signals. And there will be incidents where trees are blocked and we get hit. So this is very important. We fund this man who has a great head of hair. I just want to say, Nazario, you have a great head of hair. You really do.
Turning gray,
but if we fund it for the safety of Los Angeles, and I think we should attack corners, and I'm out starting to take pictures with a little camera of our traffic signals that are now being overgrown by trees. They did not get the memo. The trees keep growing. And just last week when there was the heat wave, many branches just cracked and fell out of nowhere. Fortunately, nobody got hit. Members, this is a very serious thing. So all the support we can do there. And I asked the Board of Public Works to get efficient and cut it down from, 7 months? Then the Board of Public Works to get efficient. They're there to be efficient and find a way to move it faster for everybody to get the service. So I just stand for the trees again and for safety. And remember, broad-based trimming, and put it all in one area. Get all trees done and get to the next area. Sometimes you have to hopscotch. I think we should do our public works regionally as opposed to by council district, because it cost him efficiency and time and money to hopscotch to district. Do all the northeast part. Do all the 14th. Then come over all the first. Do it a sweep. Thank you very much. But remember, Mr. City Attorney, check into that, because we need to be protective of the public's safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fuentes.
Nazario, thank you for what you do. I know that you're working with limited resources, and I just want to underscore the point that Mr. Huizar and Mr. Labange made. I know that Recommendation 59 is asking to have you all do the analysis to understand how efficient, what the value is by contracting out. I'd hope that in that analysis you can help us understand what the high watermark was for tree trimming. What budget year were we in where we actually were able to do this better than we do today? Because, second to the sidewalks, all the calls I get are on tree trimming, and you've been fantastic in helping us. But if we could, in the report back, understand what budget years worked, what were the models, and maybe we can build from there. Thank you.
I will.
Okay, and thank you. And Mr. Nazario, you're one of the best we have. You somehow do a lot of magic, so I appreciate you 200%. So let's vote on that. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
And what do we have next? Is it, what do you have?
79F.
Okay, so it's my understanding on this issue, the questions have been answered as well. So on this item, let us open the roll. Thank you, Mr. Bonds. Let us open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
So that brings us now, Mr. Labange.
83V, reconsideration. If you could, it's about asphalt plants. And I just want to add 2 words.
Let's open the roll of reconsideration on, what was it, 83 what?
V is in victory.
Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
Go ahead, Mr. Labange.
83V, the 2 words I want to add, and cement plants. If we're buying asphalt plants, let's buy cement plants. DWP has cement plants that they put up temporary. They're doing the new reservoir out there by Griffith Park, and it works. So we should make, if we are, some of our greatest things are our asphalt plants, especially the Olympic plant and the Valley plant on Sherman Way. They deliver for the city. Let's see if we could do some asphalt and concrete. 83V. V is in victory. 83V, not B. V is in victory.
Okay, so Mr. Englander.
Just on that, just a question for clarity on, would that just be more appropriate on report back on 189, which is to retrofit? It's looking at retrofitting the asphalt plants, to add looking at that so we get a full report back comprehensively? So it's on a report back number 189. Might be the best place so we get a comprehensive look.
189 would be the correct place.
189?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, then let us vote on that. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
Now, I believe that brings us to 115. Mr. Buscaino, or am I wrong?
Thank you, Mr. President. On the Department of Recreation and Parks, as far as their positions, does the department have a short-term, long-term goal or strategies to fund the restored positions without general fund dollars? Oh, here's Regina. Thank you, Regina. If you got my question.
No, I heard it.
Okay, thank you.
Regina Adams, Executive Officer, Recreation and Parks. Yes, the way this has been added back to, these positions have been added back to the budget, they are unfunded, so what we'll have to do is we'll have to hold some of our other vacant positions in order to fill these positions and to be able to fund them. Of course, we also have to get them unfrozen through the managed hiring process.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's prepare to vote on this item. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
Mr. Koretz.
I'd like to ask for reconsideration on item 79F.
Okay, this vote on reconsideration 79F. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
Okay, Mr. Koretz.
And I noted in the context of a motion that's going to be reviewed, item number 10, it would appear that each signal costs roughly $200,000, and there is a motion by Ms. Martinez to identify 2 signals in her district. It would appear that there's money in this number, which I assume is not coincidental, that correlates to 2 signals for each council district. And I know each of us has those same needs for signals and have a long list of those that are in need. So I wonder on item F if we could just ask that 2 signals per council district be allocated for that $6 million.
Why don't
either that,
Mr. Okay,
either that, or the other 14 of us may all want to come back with motions for our 2 signals in this process.
Let us go to Mr. Bonin right now. I think maybe some clarification here.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, DOT hasn't been doing signal work for a couple of years, and this year we managed to get $6 million allocated to do it, which is a huge step forward. The department has a $30 million backlog in signal improvements, and many of them are urgent public safety needs. So the department is going to be reporting back to Transportation Committee in the next couple weeks, listing all of the various projects and putting in Tier 1 the ones that are most urgent public safety needs, where we have the greatest risk of danger to our residents and legal exposure. So what I would like to do is, rather than start dividing by 15 as we're moving to a city of metrics, is figure out what the most urgent public safety needs are. Every member of the council can see what the list is, and the council will be able to vote on that, but to at least first have the department do the analysis. So I'd ask that this item go to T committee before it comes back for individual signal expenditures.
Mr. Krikorian?
I think Mr. Bonin covered it.
Okay, then Mr. Labange?
Yeah, I think you make a good point, Mr. Chairman of Transportation. But at the same time, the department must articulate how far they are behind and then be able to work with our offices so we could articulate what are the community needs that we perceive. Because sometimes our deputies are as good as the engineers. And I speak to Van Ness and Franklin Avenue, which they denied a signal, even though in 1976 they put a signal in at Hollywood and Van Ness. It would make sense to me by this time we should have one at Van Ness and Franklin. But we'll go through the process. But I think the department, which for the last several years has been doing all this kind of stuff, has got to focus on traffic safety.
Mr.
And come back to us for that. Thank you, Mr. President, and Mr. Bonin always.
I think Mr. Bonin is on top of that. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Koretz, we should just go on and vote on this motion again. Not motion, but item, which is 79F. Let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
Yes, and we took care of Mr. Buscaino's 115, right? Mr. Parks?
It's not a number in this report, but I wanted to get an update from the CAO-CLA on LASA. It's my understanding that they have been cut several $100,000, and it's something like $600,000 over the last several years. And it's also my understanding that the county is willing to absorb about half of that. And I just want to know what the status is, if we're willing to also absorb the other half.
So I was just made aware of this issue this morning, and I think we'll be able to address the shortfall through the year-end FSR.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now, Karen, where's that bring us? Time to go through motions?
Yes, we're ready for the motions.
And so what, we go through the first batch?
Mr. President.
I heard of Mr. Corian.
Yep. Before we begin on the motions, I just wanted to advise the council that it appears that the processing is about done with the motions that are in. So if you have any other motions that you're working on, please get it in like right now. Otherwise, we're going to have a situation where we're going to have to recess again and wait for them to be processed. But as of now, we're about ready with all of the motions. And Mr. President, if I may, on the first packet of motions 1 through 10, we've reviewed them, and I don't know if we need to go through them individually, but I would recommend adoption of motions 1 through 9, and would ask that motion 10 be referred to Budget and Finance, where it will promptly be waived, and also to Transportation.
No, I know. Okay, so let's vote on items 1 through 9. Let's hold one. We'll vote on the remaining items. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
Okay, so now Mr. Buscaino.
I wanted to vote no on item number 1. We have some issues with the grid funding.
Okay, then why don't we just
show no vote?
Why don't we vote on that, and then you'll be afforded the opportunity for your no vote.
Thank you.
Let's open the roll. Wait on item 1.
Pool question?
No, the grid.
Okay, grid, got it. The pool's not in there?
Pool's fine.
Yeah. So you would have to ask to pull the pool thing out separately.
Yes.
Just maybe bifurcate the pool item.
Just a clarification on pools, Mr. CAO. Every year we run in here in September and say extend the pools to October because it's always heat. You know, we close the pools. Could the management of recreation and parks just ask the one question? It's very important because think how hot it is in that month.
I understand,
okay.
But let's bring them up.
Yeah, but it's not summer year-round, but the extended late summer. Is this funding for the Friday, Saturdays of late summer at the big pools in the city? Not the year-round.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, Tom, could you repeat the question, please?
The number of times we've come in August, September, and said, hey, it's going to be 100 degrees the next month, says Fritz. So we got to keep the pools open for the weekend into October. Does this include extended hours?
Regina Adams, Executive Officer, Recreation and Parks. What this is for us there are about 5 pools that are not supposed to continue on a year-round basis. So what this, I understand this motion has in there for us to continue to operate those pools beyond the summer season, as well as for the Northridge pool to remain open for 2 additional months after the Labor Day.
But add Griffith Park pool in there. It's the busiest pool in the city. And I'll come back to the CEO and try to find funding. Because Hollywood Pool is under construction, so it's pretty tough to use Hollywood Pool.
So, Mr. Labange, let's vote on this. Mr. Buscaino, you'll be... Yes.
I'd like to bifurcate the first part and vote separately the first part and the second part is a pool item.
Okay, is that a problem in doing it that way? There'll be 2 votes, so let's do that. Let's do the first vote. Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
14 ayes, 1 no.
Second vote. Let's open the roll. Close the roll. Tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
And then number 10, Mr. Krikorian, you wanted us to refer that to Budget and Finance?
On number 10, Mr. President, it technically needs to be referred to Budget and Finance because it's a revision to the recommendation, but I would waive it, and I would ask that it be dual referred to Transportation as well, so Mr. Bonner's committee can consider it on substance.
Without objection, that'll be the order. Okay, now we're going to go through items 11 through 22.
Okay,
Mr.
very quickly.
Labange.
President and members of council, 11 through 20 are my items. I just want to make a public statement.
Go right ahead.
Okay, on these items, and then you could, if there's any questions you have. The first one is we aggressively asked the CAO to look at buying the full parcel next to Fire Station 88 in Sepulveda. It's where our heavy task force is. Become an earthquake center. It is Army Corps of Engineer land. CAO will study it. Number 12 is asking our Cultural Affairs Department to work with the CAO to TOT tax. That's for tourists, and the tax that they pay to create opportunities for our artists to work internationally with our city attorney, with our sister city program, and also the CAO will review it and report back. That is number 12. Number 13 is to ask that we reserve levels of LAPD officers. Go back to the 2000 level. Right now, I think there's 626 reserve officers. We could use more. It's an issue with processing. Ms. Englander, Mr. Buscato, you're all over it. We're just trying to push that up the ladder. Number 14, and I thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to express myself on these issues this way. Speed humps. You put in a speed hump, you make a street safe. Identify it. 4 years ago, we stopped the program. Let's get it back online. Number 15 is this to ask the CAO to report in the budget the cultural facilities that could use docents. The county of Los Angeles at LACMA on Wilshire Boulevard, where Urban Heights is. Beautiful. They have over 527 docents, people who volunteer. I'm sorry to say that we don't have a docent program at the observatory. And I want to work with the Dr. Krupp and to get docents to help out. We have great docents at the zoo who volunteer. It's to ask that we look at everything, because we're not going to get this done unless we get help from others. Number 16 is to ask that there are a working group, the biggest public, and we thank the mayor. Right now at this hour, he's in Washington, D.C. signing over $2 billion plus, right, Mr. Cole, for the Purple Line extension. For us to be successful, we should have a working group, and I mean this because these public works projects don't get done unless people are shoulder to shoulder in the same quarters achieving the greatness. So it's asked for this working group to help to move the Wilshire subway extension from presently at Western all the way to San Vicente. And I thank Mr. Koretz for that second. Lastly, not lastly, but second to lastly, or third to lastly, the police department. Traffic is a big issue. The police department focuses on many things, and they do a great job, but I think there should be a deputy chief of traffic, one person for traffic safety, whether it's for motorists, buses, cyclists, pedestrians, a deputy chief for traffic safety. Also, the next is ask CAO, working with Mr. Price for the Dead Sea Scrolls exhibit coming to the California Science Center, if we can identify funding to help in that art program from 1% of the arts or whatever. And also another one that's very close to my heart is street cleaning. Street cleaning has been dropped over the period of times. Our street cleaners are some of the best in the world. Those who are in those acting positions, Mr. CAO, should be moved up so they're at the same grade as a street cleaner. But we should look to combine street cleaning and sanitation as the city of New York and other major cities do. And lastly, number 20, to help our 311 call center, expanding the hours of operation as they serve the public, and also look to get all call centers except 911 into 311. Mr. President, I expedited 10 motions there. I asked for an aye vote, and I thank you. This is an opportunity to do things in a correct way to serve the people of Los Angeles better. Thank you.
Mr. Labange, and I do anticipate you and I working together on next year's budget. So this is not it. Mr. Englander.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to sit and go through these if that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Lamonge. And these are actually, I think I support every single one of these with a couple suggested changes or report backs. You'd mentioned on item 12 that all you're asking for is a report back, but actually the motion doesn't state that. Just for clarity, I would ask that not only they report back on funding this, but they do so with looking for grant opportunities instead. And I think there's plenty of grant opportunities. Okay.
These are transit occupancy tax to promote the arts.
If we could have them report back and look at those options.
Report back.
That'd be great. Okay, so that'll be the amendment on number 12. On 13 as well, with PD, rather than an instruction, my concern is with the personnel department backlogged with hiring for fire department, with the DWP, PSRs, as well as police. Don't know. We totally, and I think I speak for Joe as well, support bringing up the reserves, but don't know what the impact will be to personnel. So to ask that they report back on what they could do to ensure that. So, and that should come back to the Budget and Finance Committee. Okay. So on 17, I would ask. LAPD now has a report ready. I was just told that report is finally ready, so we'll bring that into committee because there's a previous council file on that I know you've been pushing and want that really bad. But PD actually needs to weigh in on this, and they've got their report ready. So I will assure you that we can get that scheduled for committee right away. So we'll go ahead and do that if that's okay with you.
You could have 2 votes.
But that instructs them to do it. We need to see what the impact is and what that does. We're not funding it, and their position on
I'll
it.
make it a report back in deference to the fine commander who used to command Hollywood. Okay.
That's a request from PD, so I want to make sure that we follow that. I think I hit them all.
Miss, are you?
I believe that.
Well, look, if you miss one, just come right back because I'm going to Mr. Blumenfield.
So I think
right
we're
now.
good with those changes. Great, excellent.
Mr. Blumenfield.
And just a minor thing on number 20. We've been working on this very important issue on 311 in the ITGS committee, so I wanted to refer that to the ITGS committee as well, so we can continue that.
Okay, Mr. Krikorian, do you have a recommendation as to how you want to proceed with these requests?
So number 11, I would recommend we adopt. Number 12, I just want to make sure that with that clarification we were clear, because the number 12 currently directs an allocation. But Mr. LeBond, you're asking that the CAO report back on funding opportunities for that. Okay, so that would be fine. Number 13, Mr. Englander has already asked to be referred.
Correct.
Okay, so that's fine. Number 14 is fine. Recommend adoption. Number 15, I recommend adoption. Number 16, I would recommend adoption. Number 17, in light of the report, we're going to wait to hear the report back on that one.
All right, but I just want to make sure is it imminent? Like we could in the next 60 days? All right, good. Okay.
Okay, so if this is asking for a report back rather than instruction to the department, then it should be consistent with what Mr. Englander has already asked. So then I would, with that amendment, I'd recommend adoption. Number 18, I recommend adoption. 19, recommend adoption. 20, recommend adoption. 21, recommend adoption. And number 22, number 22, I think needs to be referred back to Budget and Finance.
How much is in the forfeit fund? You know?
We don't know offhand. So.
Okay, so Mr. Krikorian, if I have that straight, 13 and 22, you're referring back to committee, and we are moving forward on the other ones per your recommendation? Okay, so with. And Mr. Blumenfield, what item did you want to go to ITG?
The 311 one, which is item 20, I believe.
So then item 20 will go to that department. So let's, on the remainders, open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
Okay, members, now we're going to take a 10-minute break to wait for some other motions to be processed. So we will recess for 10 minutes. If I could have everyone keep it down. And before, we are still in recess, but I do think we have some special visitors, and I'd like to defer to Ms. Martinez to introduce our special visitors.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to welcome Ms. Simaruzzi's class from Alta California Elementary School. Please stand up. This is the student council that is visiting us here this morning. Welcome to City Hall.
Look at yourself, kids, on television. Wait. Hey. Welcome to your City Hall. If we could now prepare to return to our session. I do want to announce, members, the servers have gone down. The last two motions that we have, kind of it's historic. They're being written by hand. And I hope to find out who's done that. Wait, a Vox handwriting? And it's a Labange motion, I think. So what I'd like, the two handwritten motions, let's get them framed, and we'll keep them here forever. If you do have motions, be sensitive to the fact that the servers are down. So you've got a few minutes to turn them in, if there are some. So with that said, Mr. Krikorian, let's wrap this up.
So we have motion packet number 3 now, motions 23 through 29. Is it necessary for the CLA to go through these as we did the last packet?
Well, well, very briefly, most of them are report backs. There are a couple that may be an issue. 23 is a report from EMD on implementing a monthly earthquake drill.
I'd recommend its adoption.
24 is resolution authority with no funding for one city planner and one geographic information system supervisor for MacArthur Park corridor planning.
I'd recommend the adoption of 24 as well.
25 is an addition of a project to the MICLA program, $500,000 for the Highland Park City Hall.
I'd ask that 25 be referred back to Budget and Finance.
26 is a report back on the LASA request for $300,000.
I would support adoption of 26.
27 is a Labange motion to report DOT to report on the resources necessary to resume the Toki program.
And support adoption of 27.
28 is similar to a previous motion. It's $100,000 in forfeited assets trust fund to install security cameras in alleys and Watts.
And for the same reasons, we'd ask that that be referred to Budget and Finance as well.
29 is an instruction directing parks to report on funding to keep Glasslock Park pool open year-round.
I think this matter has already been addressed in the previous motion that we did, but I'd be happy to recommend adoption.
Hold on, it's been handled in item number 1. Thank you. Yeah.
So we can just note and file or withdraw 29. There are a few more remaining that aren't in the packet. Mr. President, if it's your pleasure to proceed with those.
Go right ahead.
Mm-hmm. So we have number 30 and 31, both of which are directions of expenditures, and I'd ask that those be referred to Budget and Finance.
All right, fine. I do want to, Mr. Miller?
Yeah, we've got number 32. We have one more that's coming in now, and that should be the last. A and B have to be done at the very end.
Okay, so why don't I recognize Mr. Englander and then somebody give me a signal when the final one is complete. Mr. Englander, I have you on the queue.
Yes. On items 22, 28, and 31, those all have to deal with the forfeited assets. 22 is already considered, but I would ask that all three follow the normal course as well, not only to Budget and Finance, but to the Police Commission and the Public Safety Committee. Those were on 22, 28, and 31, all having to deal with forfeited assets. That they go to also beyond the Budget and Finance Committee, Police Commission as appropriate, and Public Safety Committee.
Very good. Agree.
Just a technical question. Why send it to
Mr. Labange.
Because they always oversee that fund first. And rather than change the course of
Because
what
that's
we've
the
always
procedure.
done.
That's all you got.
Following
got
the procedure.
Procedure. Thank you.
Okay, so let's vote on this packet of items. And I think we do have another one left, but let's vote on these. Let's open the roll.
Well, do you want to specify?
I'll let you specify what's going on, and then I will call for the vote.
So numbers 23, 24, 26, 27, and 29, I would recommend adoption.
So on those items, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
And then, Mr. President, I would ask you to please refer items number 25, 28, and 28 to Budget and Finance, and also, as Mr. Englander specified, those which need to be referred to Public Safety as well. I didn't write the numbers down, sorry, but as Mr. Englander said.
Okay, so let's prepare to vote on those items as well. Let's open the roll. Oh, so we can just okay. So we'll refer those without objections.
And then, Mr. President, I'd ask that motions numbers 30 and 31 both be referred to Budget and Finance.
Okay, so without objection, that'll be the order on 31 and was it 30, 31, or 30?
30 and 31.
30 and 31.
And then there apparently are still some that are coming out of the printer shortly.
There's one more, 32, which is being handwritten, so it still has to be signed. So it'll be just a few minutes.
Okay. So we'll go into another recess for a few minutes until we receive. How far out? How long do you think? How quickly can Avak write? So we'll recess until that document is brought before us. So I just want everybody to know that that's a correct motion. Mr. Koretz, did you sign it? Yes, Mr. Krikorian. I could defer to you to explain this motion that is now before us.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion C is perhaps a bit irregular and out of the norm, but it's for a very important and auspicious occasion. As you all know, members, our CLA, Jerry Miller, is completing work on his last budget of his storied and stellar career in service to the city of Los Angeles. And so I understand that Mr. Miller likes to play solitaire, and in his retirement he'll have much more opportunity to do so. So we've prepared Motion C with you can't see it on TV, but a full color printout of a deck of cards, which strangely goes up to 15. The ace of hearts through the 15th of hearts, with all of the members' pictures of the city council. And what we'd like to do is move that the mayor's proposed budget be amended to dedicate budget 2014-15 to Jerry F. Miller, Chief Legislative Analyst, for his many years of service to the city of Los Angeles and to the city council.
Mr. President, I move we reopen public comment on Jerry Miller.
Hearing no seconds.
Is this going back to the Department of Aging for report back?
Mitchell. All right.
Way to be a buzzkill, Mr. Ingram.
If we could prepare to vote on that item now, let's open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
15 ayes.
Thank you, Jerry, so very much. Mr. Weezar.
And I want to know where Jerry Miller keeps a secret server, because I thought it was broken and we couldn't get anything else out, but this is very nice. It's color, and no, this is the first colored motion I've ever seen.
That's the document that broke the server, okay?
And for the record, Mr. Weezar, and for future budget years reference, we did this ahead of time. We didn't wait until the final minute to get our budget motions in. We did it ahead of time.
I think that was the first one I signed. With that said, Madam Clerk, is there any additional work before this body?
No, Mr. President.
Well, I want to again thank everyone from every department, from every council staff, CLA, CAO, Mayor's Office, everyone. And in particular, a big thank you to our Budget and Finance Committee. You guys did an unbelievable job. Unbelievable job. And the reason why today was such an efficient day is because of the many hours, Mr. Krikorian, that you and the rest of the Budget Committee did. You made sure all the officers were properly briefed. This was a phenomenal job, and I mean that. With that said, Mr. Krikorian?
Mr. President, before we adjourn, I would ask that all members join us for a picture with Mr. Miller before we all go our separate ways.
So if we could all move to the center table. And Betsy, you set up the shot.
Yeah, right. That was good that I was late. Yeah, right here. Come on, man. Yeah, right here. Right here. Okay, excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. Hey, how are you doing?
Come on. Take thumbs up. Why not? Yep. Good.
One more.
Oh, 10 more. Come on, Paul. 10 more.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Nice. Nice.
Excellent.
Very nice.
Thank you, sir. Ian.
Ladies and gentlemen, this special meeting of the Los Angeles City Council is officially adjourned.